Welcome to the Unknown Chronicles, where the veil between reality and the mysterious is razor thin. Together we'll journey into the darkest recesses of the human experience, where truth twists into terror and shadows whisper secrets. Prepare yourself to face the unexplained, the unsettling, and the unspeakable. The unknown is waiting. Let's step into the darkness. Today, we have our next story coming from Emily of Colorado. This story is called The Midnight Watcher. I don't talk about what happened that Christmas Eve, ever, but it's one of those memories that sticks to you like a stain you can't quite scrub out, no matter how hard you try. With the season here, I can feel it creeping back. I've tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that I was just a child with an overactive imagination, but I know better. I was 11 years old, living in a small town in Colorado. A postcard picture lit a town that looked like something out of a snow globe. Back then, I loved Christmas more than anything. I believed in all the magic of the season, especially Santa Claus. Every year, I'd try to stay awake hoping to catch a glimpse of him. My parents would laugh and say, Santa only visits when good children are asleep. But that year, I was determined to prove them wrong. I remember the house being so quiet at night. The only sounds were the crackling fire in the living room and the faint hum of the wind outside. The curtains were slightly open, showing glimpses of the picturesque town with its lights and the light swirling of snow. The Christmas tree lights blinked softly, casting warm, colorful patterns on the wall. I sat by the fireplace wrapped in a blanket, my eyes fixed on the plate of cookies I'd left out for Santa. I glanced over at the clock on the wall. My parents had gone to bed hours earlier. It was almost midnight. I started to shake from excitement. I was certain Santa would be here soon. As it reached midnight, the house felt different, unnaturally heavy. It started with a sound. At first I thought it was just snow hitting the roof of the house, but there was something heavier, a creaking noise like wood bending under pressure. My heart leapt. Could it be the reindeers? I hurried to the windows, my breath fogging the glass. But all I saw now was a snowstorm outside, swirling like a living thing. Then came the thud. A heavy, deliberate sound from above, followed by the faintest scratch of something dragging across the roof. My excitement turned into unease. I told myself it was just Santa, but something about the noise felt wrong. It was too slow and way too heavy. And then came the sound of something slithering down the chimney. Not the quick whoosh I imagined for Santa. This was slow and wet, like something sticky being pulled through a tight space. An icy dread settled in my stomach, but I couldn't look away. I watched the fireplace, my heart hammering in my chest. I watched as a hand appeared from the fireplace. It wasn't gloved as I imagined Santa's would be. This one was long, bony, and blackened, the nails curling like claws. Another hand followed, gripping the brick with unnatural strength, and then he came out. I don't even know if I can call it a he. It looked like Santa, but it wasn't. His red suit was filthy, torn, and covered in dark stains that I prayed wasn't blood. The white trim was matted and yellowed, like it hadn't been cleaned in decades. His beard hung in clumps, dripping with something oily, and his face. God, his face. It was stretched too thin, like the skin had been pulled tight over his skull, and his eyes glowed like embers. They found me almost immediately. "Emily," he said, his voice a rasping whisper that sounded like it came from deep within the earth. "You've been waiting for me." I couldn't speak. I couldn't even scream. I just stood there, clutching the blanket as he moved towards me. His body jerked and twisted with every step, like his bones didn't fit together right. When he smiled, it was the worst part. His mouth stretched wide, revealing crooked yellow teeth that seemed too sharp for a human. "Santa?" I whispered in my voice, barely audible. His grin grew wider. "You've been a very curious little girl," he said, crouching down to my level. "But could children stay in bed?" I tried to back away, but my body wouldn't listen. He reached out one long, clawed finger, brushing against my cheek. His touch was ice cold, and I remember it felt like all the warmth in the room had been sucked away. "You shouldn't have stayed awake," he whispered. "It's dangerous." Then suddenly his head jerked, and his glowing eyes narrowed. He cocked his head as if listening to something I couldn't hear. His grin vanished. "They're coming," he hissed, but this time his voice carried an edge of mockery. His ember-like eyes narrowed in malice. He tilted his head towards the window, his mouth twitching with an amused smirk. "Always trying to spoil my fun," he murmured. "Always trying to spoil my fun," he muttered, his tone dripping with exaggerated irritation. "Who?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. His grin returned. Sharp and sinister. "Oh, you don't know," he said with a chuckle that sounded like gravel scraping against metal. "Let's just say they're the party poopers of my world. Always so righteous, so serious. Ugh. It's exhausting." The twinkling lights on the Christmas tree dimmed and flickered, their radiance swallowed by moving shadows. He rolled his glowing eyes dramatically. "Honestly, they're so predictable," he said, tapping a clawed hand against his chin. "Always ringing those blasted bells, thinking it will scare me off. Like I'm some kind of dog." A low, droning hum began to fill the air, vibrating through the room. The sound of a war, discordant bells joined it, and the creature's smirk widened. "See? There they go again," he said, gesturing towards the fireplace with annoyance. "Can't a guy have a little fun without being interrupted?" The shadows in the room began to shift and writhe, holding together near the fireplace. The creature's twisted form straightened, and he clapped his hands together, rubbing them with mock enthusiasm. "Well, I suppose I should go before they ruin everything," he said, his tone almost cheerful. "Wouldn't want them getting all the credit for saving you now, would we?" Before I could respond, he lunged towards the fireplace, his body collapsing into itself like smoke being sucked through a narrow pipe. As the shadows surged forward to swallow him, he twisted back one last time, his ember-like eyes glinting with mischief. His grin widened to an almost comical degree. "Next year, little one," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "Next year, you'll be all mine." And then he was gone. The hum and the bells ceased, leaving only the faint crackle of the dying fire. The shadows receded, and the tree's light flickered back to life, their warm glow returning as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I knew something had been here, something that didn't belong. When I finally found the courage to move, I ran to my parents' room screaming. They didn't believe me, of course. They thought it was just a nightmare. When they came downstairs and they saw the footprints, they couldn't explain it either. They told me not to worry, that it must have been some sort of prank. But the look in their eyes, the way they avoided the fireplace for days, told me they knew something had happened. I knew too. I knew the truth. That thing wasn't Santa. It was something else, something far older, far darker, wearing the skin of a legend like a mask. And it knew my name. I tried to forget, I tried to move on, but every Christmas Eve, as midnight draws nearer, the fear crawls back, chilling my bones. I double-check the locks, close the window tight, and make sure I'm tucked safely in bed. But there's always that gnawing fear, the one that keeps me awake, waiting for the darkness to return. Because I can feel it deep down. That thing is out there, watching. And one day, when the time is right, it will come again. Next time, I'm not sure anyone will be able to stop it. So remember this. When midnight strikes and the fire flickers low, don't stay awake. Don't look towards the chimney, because if you do, you might see those ember eyes watching. And that's when it's already too late. Did you hear that, boys and girls? If you haven't already, it's time to take heed. On Christmas Eve, when the world falls quiet and darkness presses in, make sure you're fast asleep. For when the clock strikes midnight, you never know who or what will be slipping down your chimney or through the tight creases of your window. No jolly old man with sacks full of presents, mind you. Oh no. The things that creep in the night wear different faces. Faces you've been told to trust, to believe in. But trust me, not all legends are meant to bring you joy. So before you lay your head down, pull your covers tight and make sure you stay in bed. You don't want to risk what might happen if you're still awake when the shadows come calling. As we continue our journey into the depths of the unknown, know this: the darkness is close. It's always waiting, lurking, just beyond the edge of your sight, ready to slip into the cracks of your home. The line between reality and nightmare is thinner than you can imagine, and sometimes all too easy to cross. Until next time, keep your eyes open and your wits sharp. Remember, the shadows are closer than you think. Merry nightmares, and sleep tight, if you can.